Today we are going to do a tool called hierarchy of intangible assets. First, I'm going to set the stage for the concept of intangible assets, and then I'm going to give you a hierarchy that I believe is a orderly list of intangible assets you have as a company, that ordered in the order of difficulty to create. So let's talk about intangible assets. This might be somewhat primitive and well known to some of you, but those of you who do not know how balance sheets are created in a business, what happens to a balance sheet when one company buys another company, let me just briefly talk about how the balance sheet is constructed. When on your balance sheet you have assets and liabilities, and the net book value of your company is the assets minus liabilities. When a company, let's say you have a company that has assets, liabilities, and the net book value, assets minus liabilities, let's say is $10 million. Now suppose a company buys your company for $15 million, recognizing that you are a going concern and paying you value for all of the assets you have. When they buy your company, they will now put on their books all of your assets and all of your liabilities, which of course only add up to a net of $10 million. But in order to account for that extra $5 million they paid, they will add something called goodwill. They will record a goodwill of $5 million. What does that goodwill mean? Well, presumably you are a going concern. You are a business that's thriving and active in the marketplace. You have assets that are not on your balance sheet. These are intangible assets. You have access to certain customers, certain customer lists, certain processes that you have going on, certain presence you have in the marketplace. You have a brand. You have all sorts of things for which that company paid you more than your book value of your company. That extra amount, the excess over book value, that buying company records as goodwill. Now, this goodwill represents intangible assets you have. I'm going to talk about what those intangible assets are, and I'm going to give you an order for how difficult is it to create those intangible assets. The most valuable intangible asset a company has is the brand. The brand of a company has value. The market knows who you are. Customers have certain experiences with your company. There is a recognition of the value they receive when they do business with your company. The buying company, in effect, has bought that value, which is recorded in the goodwill. So probably the most difficult intangible asset to create is the brand. I will list them in the order in which they are the difficulty to create, and later on I'll talk about how difficult it is to destroy them. So brand is one of the most difficult assets to create, and it's probably one of the most, in the hierarchy of intangible assets, top on the list. The next item I'm going to put in there is culture. You see, you have a company with employees that all operate as a team. They have been working together to create the company you've created. They have been working together to sell the products, to build the products, to run the operations. That has created a culture within the company that has value. Again, it's an intangible asset. It is a very difficult asset to create. To illustrate that, I'm going to tell you a little story. Long time ago, I ran a business where we sold flat panel monitors. Now, the business, it turns out, in flat panel monitors, there's not much differentiation in the product. In fact, later on I'll tell you there's not much money you can make in the margins of these products. But in order to win the business, you've got to move extremely fast. Anyway, many years later, we were selected as one of the 5 top vendors by Dell. Dell selected us one of the top 5 vendors for that year and invited the CEO of the 5 companies into the Bellagio in Las Vegas for a big gala reception. There I was as the CEO of our company, along with my entourage of people, along with the Dell entourage hosts that were hosting us. We were there in a big ballroom at the Bellagio, 5 different groups at 5 corners of the ballroom, and Michael Dell flies in to shake hands and spend 15 minutes with each of the CEO. As he's going around, he's being briefed before he is taken to the next company, briefed on Dell's relationship with that company and what business they do, so that he's knowledgeable in the conversation. And there he is, he's brought to me, and we're going to talk about our flat panel monitors. The company's name was Planar Systems. So there comes Dell, Michael Dell. Now I'm of course prepared, knowing that I'm going to meet Michael Dell. I'm prepared with the questions I'm going to ask of Michael Dell. So when he comes up, I ask him, why Planar? Why do you guys do business with us? We are a small company. Here's a great answer. He says, if I needed a piece of technology, I could buy the piece of technology by finding a company that has the technology, buying the company, maybe, $50, $60, $70 million. I buy the company, I tether the people with stock options, and a couple of years down the road, I've got the technology. I'm quite comfortable with that technology now. But if I had that kind of $50, $60, $70 million, and I wanted to cause my company to be speedy and agile, I wanted to create a culture of speed and agility in my company, where would I go buy that? Where can I find speed and agility that I could buy with money? I could certainly find a small company that was speedy and agile. I sure could. I could buy that company. Yeah, I could buy them. But what do you think I would do to that company when I bought them? I'll probably slow them down. You see, speed and agility as a culture is not something I can just go and buy. I've got to develop it within my company. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time, and very difficult in a multi-billion-dollar company. That's why we like working with you, he said. See, what that showed to me was culture as an intangible asset is a very high valued asset, one of the most difficult things to create. The next on that list for me is channels. The access and relationship with customers. The access to and relationship with customers. That is a very valuable asset. I'll take the same example. When I was running Planar Systems, we were selling these flat panel monitors. Let me give you a quick feel for what the value proposition in the flat panel monitors was. The closer you were to the customer, the more margin you got. So in effect, the guys who were actually dealing with the customers, like CDW, PC Connection, Dell, PC Warehouse, these people got far more value, far more margin than people up the food chain got. In fact, ask yourself, how much, when you pick up a product at Walmart, pick up a box of screws. The box of screws is probably $1.49. Ask yourself, how much does Walmart buy that from the company that makes the screws? And then ask yourself, what is the cost of goods for them? And keep going up the food chain. You'll find that the guy who is actually getting the steel out of the ground and making iron ore, making steel from it, is getting less margin. The guy who's making the screws is getting a little bit more margin. By the time you get to Walmart, Walmart's making a good margin on this. And why is that? Because they are close to the customer. So if you have access to and relationship with customers, that is a very high intangible asset, very difficult to create and very valuable. And then infrastructure. I'll tell you another story here. Many years ago, I visited a friend of mine who actually I used to work with. He was the executive vice president of Siemens, ran all of the Siemens telecommunications business. There I was visiting him in Munich, and he was telling me about Siemens. We had not seen each other. We had worked together in the same company somewhere else. We had not seen each other for 5-6 years. He had been in Siemens for about half a dozen years, and he was telling me about Siemens, how big Siemens was. He said, Balaji, there is probably 190 countries or so. I think there's 193 countries in the United Nations. Siemens has operations in over 200 countries. He says, the amount of infrastructure we have, the presence we have in more countries than there are members of the United Nations, the offices we have there, the people that we have there, our ability to have a legal structure, pay the taxes, do the accounting, that infrastructure cannot be created overnight. So infrastructure, the presence in the marketplace across the markets you serve, that is an intangible asset that is difficult to create. Moving down the list, operations. If you have a company of, say, 300 people or so, 300 people get up in the morning every day. They show up at work. They show up. They know what to do. Each of them goes to wherever it is they need to go to. Some people go to the manufacturing operation. They start running the machines. Some people go to the warehouse, start loading up the loading dock. Each person is doing what they're supposed to do. Each of them knows what they're supposed to do. They work with the other people that have to help them do what it is they have to do. That going concern, that operation, the functioning entity has value. It is an intangible asset, and that's not easy to create. And then processes. You have various processes in your company. These processes have been developed over time. These processes have been designed by people that over time they found is the best way to do something. That is an intangible asset. Notice as you go further down here, you can actually move that to another company. These are more transferable. And finally, functional competence. If you are a functional competence, if you are a, say, technology company, you have people who are technologists. If you are an accounting firm, you have people who are all CPAs. If you are a law firm, you've got lawyers. If you're a medical firm, you've got doctors. You've got functional competency in whatever it is you do. If you're a building company, you've got people who know how construction works. The functional competence is important, absolutely important to run the business. But we often think it is what makes the difference. And you've got to be careful in getting into that groove. You see, this is important, but this is the most difficult thing to create. The value of that great brand will any day beat. So the difficulty in creation, these are ordered in the order of each one being more difficult than the next to create. At the same time, they are also easier to destroy. It is hard to destroy the functional competence, very easy to destroy the brand. So when you buy another company, there it is, you paid that extra $5 million or so, you put that on your balance sheet as goodwill, and you said, the reason I paid the extra $5 million is for all of this. Very important, quite important, and so on. And this is the easiest thing to destroy, followed by that, followed by that. So be careful in getting enamored with the functional competence as the most difficult thing. It is important, it is why the business works, but it's not the most difficult thing to create. Long term, the brand, culture, channel, infrastructure beat out, in terms of difficulty, functional competence. These are the most easiest things to move to another place. These you cannot move at all to another place. So as a company, ask yourself, what are the intangible assets we have? How do we protect them? How much investment have we made in creating them? Understand the hierarchy of intangible assets.